Hi, I'm Bud. Welcome to Kimber's Kingdom, the home of everything Kimber the White Lion. On this channel, I'm hoping to connect with fellow Kimber fans like you, so if there's something you'd like to see more of, or less of, let me know in the comments. I want to make the best videos I can for you guys. Today's video is part of a series exploring the elements it takes to make a great animated series or comic, using the example of Kimber the White Lion, my personal favourite animated series of all time. It's often said that the concept is the least important part of a story. Execution is what makes the story great. And yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. A great concept with poor writing and uninteresting characters can definitely end up falling flat. And you can definitely make a good story, or even a great story, with a bland concept. But to make a truly timeless story, a story that will be loved and valued for generations, I think you really do need a concept that in and of itself really means something and gets people excited. If Star Wars had been about Luke Smith taking on his mean boss at Subway, it simply wouldn't have been as memorable as the story of Luke Skywalker taking on an evil galaxy-spanning empire, even if the execution was just as good. If Frankenstein had been about a mad scientist creating a terrible new soft drink flavour, it simply wouldn't have been as memorable as a mad scientist creating life. The concept actually is truly important. And I would argue it's a big reason Kimber the White Lion has been so beloved for generations. The concept of an idealistic young lion taking on the whole world and overturning the natural order that's lasted for thousands of years in order to bridge the gap between humans and animals, predators and prey, is really an incredible concept for a story. I don't know about you, but I'm immediately interested by that. Yes, the execution had to be good too, of course, but that concept in and of itself really caught my interest and the interest of thousands of other fans worldwide. So how do you come up with a great story concept like that? Well, one approach, and I suspect this might have been the one Osamu Tezuka might have used when coming up with Kimber the White Lion, is to work out your main character first, and then come up with a concept that would only work for that character. The story of Kimber the White Lion simply wouldn't work if anyone else was the main protagonist. The entire concept of the whole story emerges from Kimber's borderline crazy idealism. Without Kimber, it'd just be a story about animals living in a jungle, which sounds interesting enough, but nowhere near as exciting as seeing one of those animals trying to redefine the way the whole world works. So see if you can come up with a really interesting and fun character first, and then try and think of a story that could only work with that character, and not just with any old protagonist. That way you're guaranteed to come up with something interesting, because it's going to be based on your original character's unique quirks and desires. But not every writer works in the same way. While some love to come up with characters first, others find it easier to start with another aspect of the story. And that's fine, there's no wrong order to do this in, but it does mean you'll have to put in a little extra work with your concept. One popular approach is to ask the question, what if, followed by some kind of interesting change to the world. For example, the concept of Romeo and Juliet could emerge from the question, what if a boy and girl were in love, but they were from families who hated each other? The concept of Pokemon could emerge from the question, what if people kept monsters as pets? Or the concept of Kimber could perhaps have emerged from the question, what if an animal grew up in the human world but became king of the jungle? Asking these kinds of questions can give you a really compelling central idea, around which you can build a full story concept. Because somehow you're unlikely to ask yourself something that's already been done, like what if aliens invaded the world? I'm not sure why this is the case. You'd probably have to ask a psychologist, not a random YouTuber like me. But when you ask yourself a bunch of these what if questions, it sort of puts you in a frame of mind where you're inclined to come up with original ideas. Asking yourself questions like this seems to awaken the childlike curiosity and imagination that we still have buried deep down in our brains somewhere. What if is like the password you need to access that locked creativity. Another approach is to try building a cool world first and then coming up with a concept that takes place in that world. So, for example, the concept of Zootopia could have started with the idea of a world where animals have built a civilization, and then the story grew from there. The concept of How to Train Your Dragon could have started with the idea of a world similar to our own Viking era, but where dragons exist alongside people. Or the concept of Kimba the White Lion could have started with the idea of a world like our own, but where animals can talk to each other and each jungle has its own king. With the world you've created as a starting point, you can then think about what conflicts might occur in that world, and use that to build your story concept. If none of these approaches worked, don't worry. There are plenty of other strategies you can try too. These are just the ones that work for me, and the ones that apply the most to Kimba, but they're certainly not the only ones out there. But don't give up on these strategies right away either. Often the biggest deciding factor as to whether they work or not is the time of week you try them. I know it sounds silly, but it seriously does make a big difference. It's different for every person, but for me personally, Monday to Friday are a write-off. When I get home from work, my brain is just too tired to be creative. Saturday is a write-off too. It's the day my brain sort of defragments and puts itself back together after the work week. But on Sundays, my brain is totally full of life. I can sit in front of my computer for hours and churn out video ideas, scripts, essays, whatever it is I want to work on. It just flows really easily on Sundays. It's different for every person. Maybe you'll find that you work best in the early morning or on Saturdays or late at night. Just try to be creative at different times and find the one that works best for you. Also, one way that's actually scientifically proven to make you more creative is to perform a light task that requires you to physically do something, but is easy enough that you get bored while doing it and your mind drifts. Something like packing a large number of bottles onto a shelf, copying a list of names from a Word document into a spreadsheet, folding a bunch of jackets or t-shirts, anything that's repetitive that you can do for a long time. This will let your brain calm down and reset. It'll clear all the fuzz that's getting in the way of your creativity and allow your thoughts to start flowing freely again. So give that a try and see how it goes. Once you've got a basic concept you like, you may still be feeling like it's a little bland. Don't worry, don't abandon it yet. There are heaps of sneaky little tricks you can use to spice up your story concept once you've got the basics down. I'll talk about a couple of them now. One, which I hinted at when I talked about Star Wars earlier in the video, is to change the setting. Obviously we can't go back in time and ask to be sure, but perhaps when Tezuka came up with Kimba the White Lion, in the first iteration of his idea the concept was a young child wants to make peace between humans and animals. There was promise to that idea, but it didn't quite sound exciting enough, so he changed the setting. A young lion in the jungle wants to make peace between humans and animals. How much cooler is that? So if you've got an idea that sounds promising but you're still on the fence about it, try changing the setting and you might find you totally fall in love with the idea. Another sneaky trick is to try switching the roles of the characters or switching something else around to present your story from a different, more interesting angle. Perhaps Kimba could have started out being about the existing ruler of a jungle trying to stop some crazy young lion who's trying to take over and introduce dangerous ideas like banning meat eating. But that didn't really sound that exciting, so Tezuka decided to switch the roles around, making the existing ruler the bad guy, Claw, and the crazy young revolutionary the good guy, Kimba. Now granted, I think this probably isn't what happened. Tezuka has always believed in the value of life, so I'm pretty sure Kimba was the hero from day one. But nonetheless, you can apply this strategy to your own concepts. If you have a concept that seems kind of cool but not quite right, try flipping it on its head. Swap the roles of the hero and villain, or reverse some other detail, like setting it in the future rather than the past, or vice versa. Find something you can reverse about your concept and see if that makes it right. And if after all this your concept still isn't working, there's one last trick you can fall back on: giving up. No, not forever. But if you start another project and work on that for a while, you might find that it gives your brain enough time to get out of the rut it's stuck in, and after a few months of working on something else, your old concept will suddenly click and you'll realize what was missing. But if that doesn't happen, don't worry too much. For every concept that does end up becoming a story, a writer will end up leaving 50 or so untouched. Don't beat yourself up about it, it's normal. Just move on and keep creating, you'll do awesome. That's all for now, fellow animals. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you won't miss a thing. If there's something Kimber related you'd like to see a video about, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your suggestions. I might look ferocious, but I don't bite, promise.